The coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago, but Dr. Kim Ji-woo kept drinking it anyway. She sat alone in the control room of the Ganymede Deep Space Communication Array, surrounded by dozens of screens that showed nothing but empty space and static. The night shift was always quiet. Most days, she wondered if anyone out there was even listening. Jupiter hung massive and beautiful outside the reinforced windows, its red spot swirling like a painted eye. The moon Ganymede moved slowly around the giant planet, carrying the human outpost that had become home to 200 scientists and engineers. They had built this place to listen to the stars, to catch any whisper from other worlds that might prove humanity was not alone. So far, they had found nothing but silence. Ji-woo stretched her arms above her head and yawned. Her partner for the night shift, Park Min-ho, had gone to grab food from the cafeteria 20 minutes ago. She expected him back any moment with 2 steaming cups of real coffee and maybe some of those terrible protein bars that somehow tasted like cardboard and sugar at the same time. She turned back to her screens and froze. One of the displays was showing something different. Instead of the usual flat line that meant empty space, there were peaks and valleys dancing across the screen. The computer was picking up a signal from somewhere far away, very far away. Ji-woo leaned forward and adjusted the controls. The signal became clearer, but it was unlike anything she had ever seen before. The pattern was too complex for natural space noise, too organized to be random. Someone or something was sending this message through the darkness between stars. Her hands shook as she typed commands into her computer. The machine began working to find where the signal was coming from. The answer made her heart beat faster. The message was traveling from a star system over 1,000 light-years away. Whatever had sent this signal had done so more than 1,000 years ago, and it was only reaching Earth now. But that was not the strangest part. As Ji-woo studied the signal more carefully, she realized it was not pointed at Earth at all. The message was aimed at empty space, at coordinates where no human colony existed. This was not meant for humanity to hear. Someone had sent a message to someone else, and Earth had accidentally caught it. She heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly saved all the data to her personal files. Park Min-ho walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee and a bag of snacks. He was humming an old song and smiling until he saw the expression on her face. "What is wrong?" he asked, setting down the coffee. "You look like you have seen a ghost." "Maybe I have," Ji-woo said. She pointed at the screen. "Look at this." Min-ho moved closer and studied the display. His smile disappeared. As a communications expert with 15 years of experience, he could tell immediately that this was not normal space noise. "Where is it coming from?" he asked. "Kepler 442 system," Ji-woo replied. "Over 1,200 light-years away." "That is impossible. Nothing we have built can send a signal that far. We did not send it. Someone else did. And they were not sending it to us." The 2 scientists stared at the screen in silence. The signal continued to pulse and dance, carrying information neither of them could understand. It was clearly a language, but not any language that had ever existed on Earth. "We need to wake up Chief Lee," Min-ho said finally. Lee Sora lived in the residential section of the station with her husband and young daughter. She was not going to be happy about being woken up at 3 in the morning, but as the chief communications officer for the entire Ganymede array, she needed to know about this immediately. Ji-woo nodded and reached for her communication device. She sent a priority message to Lee's personal unit. Within 5 minutes, Lee was calling back, her voice thick with sleep. "This better be important," Lee said. "My daughter finally went to sleep an hour ago." "Chief, we have intercepted an alien transmission," Ji-woo said simply. The line went quiet for a long moment. Then Lee's voice came back, suddenly very awake. "I will be there in 10 minutes. Do not let anyone else know about this yet. And whatever you do, keep recording everything." While they waited for Lee to arrive, Ji-woo and Min-ho studied the signal more carefully. The pattern was incredibly complex, with layers of information woven together in ways that human communication systems had never attempted. Whoever had sent this message had technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. But there was something else in the signal that made Jiwoo feel cold inside. Even though she could not understand the language, there was an emotion in the transmission that came through clearly. Desperation. Fear. This was not a friendly hello to the universe. This was a cry for help. Lee Sora arrived wearing her uniform hastily thrown over pajamas, her hair still messy from sleep. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and a mind that could solve problems faster than most computers. She had been chosen to lead the Ganymede array because she was the best at finding patterns in chaos. "Show me," she said simply. For the next hour. The three scientists worked together to analyze the signal. Lee had access to advanced translation programs and pattern recognition software that were classified above Jiwoo and Minho's clearance level. As she fed the signal into these programs, pieces of the message began to make sense. The results were terrifying. "It is a warning," Lee said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone is trying to warn their people about something coming." "What kind of something?" Minho asked. Lee turned to face them and Jiwoo could see fear in her eyes. "Destroyers. Devourers. The translation program is having trouble with the exact word, but the meaning is clear. Something that consumes entire worlds is coming for them." "Are they asking for help?" Jiwoo asked. "No," Lee replied. "This is not a distress call. This is a final warning. They are telling other members of their species to run, to hide, to save themselves however they can." She paused and looked back at the screen. "I think whoever sent this message is already dead." The control room fell silent except for the humming of computers and the distant sound of Jupiter's winds howling outside the station. Three humans sat in the darkness, staring at the last words of a dying civilization. The signal was not aimed at us, Lee continued. It was meant for other colonies of the same species. But our expanding communication network accidentally intercepted it. We were never supposed to hear this. "What do we do now?" Minho asked. Lee Sora stood up and walked to the window. Jupiter's great red spot seemed to stare back at her like a watching eye. Somewhere out in the darkness between the stars, an entire species was dying or already dead. Their final message had traveled over 1,000 years through empty space, only to be accidentally overheard by a species that was not even supposed to exist when the message was first sent. "We report this to Earth Command," she said finally, "and then we pray that whoever killed them is not coming this way." But even as she said it, Lee knew that was not the end of the story. Humans had accidentally become witnesses to genocide. They had heard the last words of a dying people. The question was not whether they would do something about it. The question was what they could possibly do about something happening over 1,000 light years away. Admiral Cho Hyunwoo had not slept well in 3 days. The translated message from the Ganymede array sat on his desk like a bomb waiting to explode. Every few hours he would read it again, hoping that somehow the words would change, that the translation programs had made a mistake. They had not. The message was clear. An alien species called the Villani had sent a final warning to their colonies before their homeworld was destroyed by something they called the Devourers. The Villani had begged their people to run, to hide, to find safety wherever they could. But according to long-range sensors, no one had answered their call. The silence from the Kepler 442 system was complete. Hyunwoo stood at the window of his office in the United Earth Space Command headquarters on Luna. Earth hung blue and white in the black sky, peaceful and unaware of the horror that had been discovered in distant space. 2 billion people lived on that world and billions more on Mars, the asteroid colonies, and the outer planets. All of them safe for now. All of them ignorant of what was coming. Because if the Devourers had destroyed one star system, they would not stop there. The door to his office chimed, and Director Han Minji entered. She was the head of the Global Defense Council, the civilian authority that controlled all of Earth's military forces. She had been in emergency meetings with world leaders for the past 18 hours. "The Council has made their decision," she said without greeting. Her face was drawn with exhaustion and worry. "We are not getting involved." Hyunwoo turned away, from the window. "They are making a mistake." "Are they?" "Admiral, we are talking about traveling over 1,200 light years to fight an enemy we know nothing about. An enemy that destroys entire civilizations. What exactly are we supposed to do? We help whoever is still alive out there. With what? Our fastest ships would take 300 years to reach that system using conventional drives. By the time we arrived, there would be nothing left to save. Hyunwoo walked to his desk and picked up a classified report. What about the quantum tunnel project? Minji's face went pale. That is suicide. The test runs showed a 60% failure rate. Any ship attempting that jump would most likely be destroyed. But there is a 40% chance it would work. You are talking about sending people to their deaths on a maybe. For aliens we have never met. Aliens who never asked for our help. Before Hyunwoo could reply, there was another chime at the door. Captain Nam Tae-hyun entered and saluted. He was a veteran of the Mars colonial wars, a man who had seen combat against human enemies, but the expression on his face showed that this was different. Sir, I have been monitoring communications from the fleet. Word is spreading about the alien message. How? Minji demanded. That information was classified. Secrets have a way of getting out, ma'am. Especially secrets this big. The crews are talking. They want to know if we are going to do something. Hyunwoo leaned against his desk. What are they saying? They want to go. Every captain I have spoken to has volunteered their ship and crew for whatever mission you plan. They know the odds. They know they will probably die, but they want to try. This is madness, Minji said. We have no obligation to these aliens. Nam turned to face her. His voice was quiet but firm. With respect, ma'am, I think we do. Explain. We heard them die. We intercepted their last words. That makes us witnesses. Maybe the only witnesses in the universe. He paused. I fought on Mars when the colonies tried to break away from Earth. I saw cities burn. I saw children die. But there was always someone left to remember, someone to tell the story. These aliens, we might be the only ones who know they existed. The only ones who heard them calling for help. The room fell silent. Outside the window, Earth continued to turn, unaware of the debate taking place on its moon. Even if we could get there, Minji said finally, what could we possibly do against something that destroys entire worlds? I do not know, Nam admitted. But someone has to try. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho arrived at the headquarters 2 hours later. He was the head of the theoretical physics department at the Seoul Institute of Technology and the designer of the experimental quantum tunnel drive. He was also the man who would have to make the impossible journey possible. The 4 leaders met in a secure conference room deep inside the Luna base. On the screen in front of them was a detailed analysis of the alien message and everything. Earth scientists had learned about the Kepler 442 system. The quantum tunnel drive can work, Dae-ho said immediately. But I will not lie to you about the risks. We have only tested it with unmanned probes, and most of those were destroyed. The mathematics are sound, but there are variables we do not understand. What are the chances of success? Hyunwoo asked. For the ship to arrive intact? Maybe 40%. For the crew to survive the journey? Maybe 30%. For them to be useful when they arrive? 20% at best. Those are terrible odds, Minji said. Yes, they are. But they are better than the odds those aliens had when they sent their message. Captain Nam leaned forward. Doctor, can the drive be installed on a military vessel? It would require major modifications. We would need to strip out most of the weapons and armor to make room for the quantum generators. The ship would be fast but fragile. How long would the journey take? If the drive works perfectly, 3 days. If it partially fails, anywhere from a week to forever. The silence stretched for several minutes. Finally, Admiral Hyunwoo stood up. I'm going to ask for volunteers, he said. Not just from the military, but from every branch of the space program. Scientists, engineers, doctors, anyone who might be useful. We will tell them the truth about the odds, and then we will let them decide. The council will not approve this, Minji warned. Then I will go around the council. There are legal ways to authorize emergency missions without full civilian approval. You could lose your career, your life. People I have never met sent a message into the darkness. They died hoping someone would hear them, someone would care enough to help. We heard them. That makes this our responsibility. Dr. Deho stood up and gathered his papers. I will start preparing the drive immediately. We can use the experimental ship Indomitable Hope. She is already designed for deep space exploration. How long do you need? Nam asked. 2 weeks to install the drive. Another week to test it. 3 weeks total. Make it 2, Hyunwoo ordered. Every day we wait more. People might be dying out there. As the meeting ended, Director Minji remained seated while the others filed out. When she and Hyunwoo were alone, she looked up at him with tired eyes. You know this is insane, do not you? We are risking everything for people we will never meet, who lived and died over 1,000 years ago. Maybe, Hyunwoo replied. But what if someone heard Earth's last message someday? Would you want them to ignore it because the odds were bad? Minji had no answer for that. Within hours of the meeting, word began to spread through the space fleet. An alien civilization had been destroyed by unknown enemies. Earth was preparing a rescue mission across impossible distances using untested technology. The chances of survival were small. The response surprised everyone except Captain Nam. Over 2,000 people volunteered for the mission in the first day. Scientists abandoned safe research positions to sign up. Engineers left comfortable jobs on Mars to join the expedition. Even civilians with no space training offered to help in any way they could. The message was always the same. Someone had asked for help, and humanity had heard them. Admiral Hyunwoo read through the volunteer applications late into the night. Each one represented someone willing to die for strangers they would never meet. It was the most human thing he had ever seen, and it was probably going to get them all killed. Captain Bae Jin-young had never expected to die in space. But as he watched the quantum tunnel tear itself apart around his ship, death seemed like the most likely outcome. The Indomitable Hope shuddered and groaned as impossible forces pulled at its hull. Warning lights flashed red across every surface, and the screaming of twisted metal filled the air. Hull breach in Section 7, Engineer Kang Seulgi shouted over the noise. I am losing power to the main engines. How long until we exit the tunnel? Jin-young called back. 30 seconds, if we are lucky. 3 minutes if we are not. Ship lurched violently to one side, throwing the crew against their safety harnesses. Through the reinforced windows of the bridge, Jin-young could see the quantum tunnel collapsing around them. Space itself was twisting into impossible shapes, showing colors that did not exist in normal reality. Dr. Yoon Dae-ho had warned them that this might happen. The quantum tunnel drive was still experimental, and the distance they were trying to travel was beyond anything ever attempted. The ship was essentially tearing a hole through the fabric of space and time, then trying to survive. The journey through that hole before it closed behind them. 10 seconds, Seulgi announced. The Indomitable Hope gave one final, terrible shudder and shot out of the quantum tunnel like a bullet from a gun. The twisted colors of the tunnel disappeared, replaced by the familiar black of normal space dotted with distant stars. But something was wrong, very wrong. Status report, Jin-young ordered as he unstrapped himself from his command chair. Medical Officer Choi Won-ho was already moving through the bridge, checking each crew member for injuries. Everyone is alive, but barely. I count 3 broken ribs, multiple concussions, and enough bruises to cover a small moon. What about the ship? Jin-young asked. Seulgi was bent over her control panel, her fingers flying across the buttons. Her face was pale with worry. We have major damage to the hull, complete failure of the navigation system, and I think we are in 3 different places at the same time. Explain that last part. The quantum tunnel broke apart during our exit. Different parts of the ship emerged at different coordinates. The bridge and crew quarters are here, wherever here is. The engine section is about 2 million kilometers away, and the weapons bay is somewhere else entirely. Combat Specialist Ro Jae-won looked up from his station. Are you saying our ship is scattered across the star system? That is exactly what I am saying. The quantum tunnel split us apart and spit us out randomly. We are lucky to be alive at all. Xenobiologist Im Soo-young, who had been studying the alien message during the entire journey, finally spoke. At least we made it to the right star system. Those are the stars of Kepler 442. Everyone turned to look at her. After the terror of the journey, they had almost forgotten why they were here. How can you be sure? Jin Young asked. I memorized the star charts during the trip. That red giant over there matches the spectral analysis we did from Earth. We are definitely in the right place. She paused and checked her instruments. The question is whether there is anything left to save. For the next several hours, the crew of the Indomitable Hope worked to restore their ship and contact their scattered pieces. Seulgi managed to re-establish communication with the engine section, where 12 crew members had survived the journey but were dealing with massive power failures. The weapons bay was still silent, and they could only hope that the 3 people stationed there were still alive. As the ship's system slowly came back online, they began to get a clearer picture of the Kepler 442 system. What they saw made everyone fall silent. The system was full of ships. Massive alien vessels that moved between the planets like schools of metal fish. Some were clearly mining operations, stripping entire asteroids down to nothing in a matter of hours. Others appeared to be construction projects, building structures that stretched for thousands of kilometers. But most terrifying were the ships surrounding the 4th planet, which had once been the Villani homeworld. My God, whispered Im Soo-young. The planet was being eaten. Massive machines on the surface were digging huge chunks out of the crust and lifting them into space, where they disappeared into the belly of ships the size of cities. What had once been a living world with oceans and continents was now a pockmarked ruin, with glowing scars where the mining machines worked. Are those the Devourers? Wonho asked. Has to be, Jin Young replied. And they are still here. On the long-range sensors, they could detect dozens of smaller vessels moving between the mining ships. These appeared to be prison transports, filled with life signs that registered as non-human. The Villani survivors were being used as slave labor for the destruction of their own world. How many? Jin Young asked quietly. Soo-young checked her readings. Maybe 10,000 Villani still alive, spread across 12 prison ships and 3 mining platforms. And how many Devourers? Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions. This is not just a mining operation, Captain. This is their entire civilization. The bridge fell quiet as the crew absorbed this information. They had come here to rescue survivors and fight off attackers, but they were facing an enemy that outnumbered them by a factor of thousands to 1. The Indomitable Hope carried a crew of 50 people and weapons designed to fight human pirates, not an alien empire. Well, said Jaewon with a grim smile. At least we know why no one answered the Villani distress call. Anyone who tried would have been destroyed immediately. So what do we do? Seulgi asked. We cannot fight them, we cannot outrun them, and we cannot rescue 10,000 prisoners with a crew of 50. Captain Jin Young studied the tactical display for a long moment. The smart thing to do would be to try to repair their quantum tunnel drive and return to Earth with intelligence about the Devourer threat. That information might help humanity prepare for the inevitable attack. But looking at the prison ships full of Villani survivors, he could not bring himself to give that order. We are going to do what humans do best, he said finally. Which is? Wonho asked. Something stupid that somehow works. Over the next few hours, they developed a plan that was indeed deeply stupid. Instead of trying to fight the Devourer fleet directly, they would use their small size and the element of surprise to conduct hit-and-run attacks on the mining operations. Their goal would not be to win a military victory, but to create enough chaos and confusion to free some of the Villani prisoners. The Devourers have never seen human technology before, Soo-young pointed out. They might not know how to respond to our tactics, or they might vaporize us in the first 5 minutes, Jaewon added helpfully. Only one way to find out, Jin Young replied. As they prepared for their first attack, Engineer Seulgi managed to re-establish contact with the weapons bay. The 3 crew members there had survived but were trapped in a section of the ship that was slowly losing air. They had maybe 6 hours before their life support failed completely. Change of plans, Jin Young announced. Our first mission is a rescue operation. We save our own people, then we worry about the Villani. How do we get to them? Sulgi asked. They are 2 million kilometers away, and we do not have engines capable of closing that distance quickly. Jin Young looked at the tactical display again. The weapons bay was drifting near one of the smaller Devourer mining platforms. If they could capture a Devourer transport ship, they might be able to reach their crew and escape before the enemy realized what was happening. We are going to steal their ship, he said. That is insane, Wanho protested. Yes, it is. But we are already committed to insane. We traveled 1,200 light years based on a message that was not meant for us, using technology that had a 60% chance of killing us, to fight enemies we have never seen before. He turned to face his crew. Insane is what got us here. Insane might be what saves those people. As the indomitable Hope limped toward the outer edge of the Devourer mining operation, Captain Bei Jin Young wondered if Admiral Cho Hyunwoo had expected the mission to go this badly this quickly. They had been in the system for less than 12 hours, and they were already improvising desperately just to keep their crew alive. But looking at the prison ships full of Villani survivors, he knew they had made the right choice. Someone had to try to help them. Someone had to care enough to take the impossible risk, even if that someone was a broken human ship held together by hope and stubbornness. 3 days after the prison ship rescue, the situation had gone from desperate to impossible, to something that might actually work. Captain Bei Jin Young stood on the bridge of what used to be a Devourer mining platform and watched as the last group of freed Villani workers finished their modifications to the station's communication array. The humans had not expected to survive their first rescue mission. They certainly had not expected to capture an entire mining platform or convince 300 Villani engineers to join their guerrilla war against the Devourers. But humans had always been good at the impossible. Status report, Jin Young called, out to his mixed crew of humans and Villani. Engineer Kang Sulgi looked up from a control panel that had been designed for beings twice her size. The quantum tunnel transmitter is almost ready. We should be able to send a message to Earth within the hour. Beside her, the Villani engineer Kyle Neth worked with movements that were both precise and beautiful. The Villani had technology that was centuries ahead of human science in some areas, but they had never learned to fight the way humans fought. Over the past 3 days, that had been changing. What about our defensive systems? Jin Young asked combat specialist Ro Jae-won. Better than I hoped, worse than I would like. We have converted 8 mining platforms into fortress stations, and the Villani have taught us how to use their gravity manipulation technology as a weapon, but we are still outnumbered about 1,000 to 1. Dr. Im Soo-young approached the captain with a tablet full of information she had gathered from interrogating captured Devourer prisoners. I think I understand what we are really dealing with here. Explain. The Devourers are not actually evil in the way we understand it. They are refugees from their own dying galaxy. They consume worlds because they need the resources to keep their civilization alive during their journey to find a new home. That does not make what they are doing right, Jin Young replied. No, but it explains why they are so efficient at it. This is not conquest or cruelty. This is survival. They process entire civilizations the same way we might process raw materials in a factory. Medical Officer Choi Wonho joined the conversation. What about the Villani they keep as prisoners? The Devourers do not understand concepts like mercy or compassion. They keep Villani alive because they are useful tools. When they stop being useful, they are recycled like any other resource. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. They were not fighting an evil empire or cruel conquerors. They were fighting refugees who had been traveling between galaxies so long that they had forgotten how to see other species as anything but resources. There is something else, Soo-young continued. According to the prisoner interviews, the Devourer leadership has never encountered a species like humans before. They cannot understand why we would risk our lives for strangers. It is causing significant confusion in their decision-making processes. Good, Jae-won said. confusion we can work with. A soft chime from the communication station interrupted their conversation. The elderly Villani, who had been working on the quantum transmitter, Elder Voss Kirin, looked up with satisfaction. "The message system is ready," he announced in his careful, translated English. "We can now speak to your homeworld." Jin Young nodded and walked to the communication station. For a moment, he wondered what he would tell Admiral Cho Hyunwoo back on Earth. The mission had gone nothing like planned, but somehow they were still alive and had managed to rescue nearly 2,000 Villani from various prison facilities. He activated the transmitter and began recording. "Admiral Hyunwoo, this is Captain Bae Jin-young reporting from the Kepler 442 system. Mission status is complicated. We have made contact with Villani survivors and confirmed the existence of the Devourer threat. The enemy is larger and more dangerous than we anticipated, but they are not invincible." He paused and looked around, the bridge at his mixed crew of humans and aliens working together. "We have discovered that the Devourers are refugees fleeing their own dying galaxy. They consume worlds not out of cruelty, but as a survival strategy during their migration. However, this does not change the fact that they represent an existential threat to all life in our galaxy." Another pause as he considered his next words, carefully. "I am requesting immediate military support and authorization to begin formal negotiations with the Devourer leadership. We believe there may be a peaceful solution that allows them safe passage through our galaxy without the destruction of inhabited worlds." The transmission was interrupted by alarms throughout the station. J1 quickly checked his tactical displays and cursed under his breath. "Massive Devourer fleet approaching. Looks like they finally decided to take us seriously." Through the station's windows, they could see dozens of enormous ships moving toward their position. These were not mining vessels or transports. These were warships, built for the sole purpose of destroying anything that threatened Devourer operations. "How long do we have?" Jin Young asked. "Maybe an hour before they are in weapons range." Jin Young turned back to the communication system and resumed his message to Earth. "Admiral, we are about to engage the enemy fleet in what will probably be our final battle. If you do not hear from us again, please remember that we came here because someone needed help. The Villani are a good people who deserved better than extinction. We have saved as many as we could." Elder Voss Kirin approached the captain and spoke in his native language. The translation came through a moment later. "Captain Jin Young, we have a proposal." "I am listening." "Let us speak to the Devourer fleet, not as their prisoners but as equals, with your humans beside us. What would you say to them? That there is another way, that they do not have to destroy every world they encounter, that some species might be willing to help them if they asked instead of simply taking what they needed." Jin Young looked around the bridge. His crew was exhausted, their ship was broken, and they were about to face impossible odds against an enemy that could destroy planets. But the hope in the elder Villani's eyes was infectious. "Do it," he said. The next hour was the strangest in human history. A mixed crew of humans and aliens broadcasting from a captured enemy station opened negotiations with a refugee fleet from another galaxy. The conversation was conducted through hastily programmed translation systems and took place while warships closed in on their position. Elder Voss Kirin spoke for the Villani, explaining that his people had never been given the chance to cooperate with the Devourers. They had been attacked without warning, their attempts at communication ignored, their civilization processed like raw material. Captain Jin Young spoke for humanity, explaining that humans had traveled impossible distances simply because they had heard someone calling for help. He told the Devourer leadership about Earth's history of helping refugees, of taking in the displaced and the desperate, and slowly, remarkably, the Devourer fleet began to slow its approach. The response, when it finally came, was unlike anything the translation systems had ever processed. The Devourer leadership was confused by concepts like voluntary cooperation and mutual assistance. They had been refugees for so many generations that they had forgotten how to ask for help instead of simply taking what they needed. But they were willing to listen. The negotiations continued for days. The Devourer warships remained in position, neither attacking nor retreating, while representatives from both sides worked out the details of an unprecedented agreement. The Devourers would be allowed safe passage through the galaxy, with human and Volani colonies providing resources and assistance for their journey to find a suitable uninhabited galaxy. In exchange, they would cease all attacks on inhabited worlds and release their remaining prisoners. It was not a perfect solution. Trust would take years to build, and there would be incidents and misunderstandings. But it was a beginning. When the quantum tunnel message finally reached Earth 3 days later, Admiral Cho Hyunwoo read it twice before calling an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. They did what? Director Han Minji asked. They negotiated a peace treaty with a nomadic alien empire, and apparently they want us to honor it. This is insane. We sent them to rescue survivors, not become galactic diplomats. No, Hyunwoo replied, looking at the message again. We sent them because someone needed help. They heard that call and responded the only way they knew how, by helping. He stood up and walked to the window, where Earth hung peaceful and blue against the stars. The Devourers are going to need supplies, fuel, and safe harbor as they pass through our galaxy. It will take them centuries to reach their destination. We have the opportunity to turn potential enemies into allies, refugees into friends. And if we refuse, then we prove that humanity only helps when it is convenient, that we only care about people when they look like us or can offer us something in return. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity had heard a cry for help from across the galaxy and responded by risking everything to save strangers. They were not going to stop helping now. 6 months later, the Ganymede Deep Space Communication Array received its first official message from the Devourer fleet. It was a simple thank you, transmitted in careful English followed by detailed star charts showing safe routes through human space. The stolen Devourer transport ship felt wrong under human hands. Everything was too large, too smooth, and made from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Combat specialist Ro Jae-won had managed to figure out the basic controls through trial and error, but he was essentially flying blind through alien technology. How much farther? Captain Bae Jin-young asked from the co-pilot seat. About 20 minutes if I can avoid crashing into anything, Jae-won replied. These controls are nothing like human ships. Everything responds differently than it should. Behind them, Dr. Im Soo-young was working frantically to decode the Devourer computer systems. They had managed to capture the transport without alerting the main fleet, but only because they had gotten incredibly lucky. The transport had been operating alone, moving supplies between mining platforms, when the human boarding party had overwhelmed its 2-person crew. I am starting to understand their language, Soo-young reported. It is not really a language at all, more like a computer code that they speak with their voices. Everything is very logical, very efficient, no emotion at all. What about the Volani? Jin-young asked. Can you find any information about them? Yes, and it is disturbing. The Devourers classify the Volani as biological tools. They are kept alive only because they are useful for certain kinds of work. According to this database, most Volani die within 6 months of capture. The transport shuddered as Jae-won adjusted their course. Through the strange windows, they could see the weapons bay from the Indomitable Hope drifting in space like a metal coffin. Life support readings showed that the 3 crew members inside were still alive, but barely. There, Jae-won pointed. I can see the docking port. The next few minutes were the longest of Jin-young's life as Jae-won carefully maneuvered the alien ship into position. One mistake would crush the weapons bay or send it spinning into space, killing the 3 people they had come to save. Finally, they heard the clang of metal against metal as the docking clamps engaged. Got them, Jae-won announced. Engineer Kang. Sulgi was already moving toward the airlock with an emergency life support kit. A few minutes later, she returned with the 3 survivors from the weapons bay. They were weak and suffering from oxygen deprivation, but alive. Now what? Asked one of the rescued crew members, Specialist Oh Min-sung. We have our people, but we are still trapped in enemy territory with no way home. Now we do something really stupid, Jin Young replied. We rescue the Villani. The plan they had developed was more like controlled chaos than actual strategy. Using the stolen Devourer transport, they would approach the prison ships pretending to be a supply run. Once they were close enough, they would disable the prison ship's engines and beam a message to the Villani prisoners, telling them how to escape. The biggest problem was communication. The Villani spoke a completely different language from the Devourers, and neither language had anything in common with human speech. I think I can manage basic concepts, Su-young said as she worked on translation programs. Simple ideas like run, hide, follow us. Anything more complex will have to wait. That might be enough, Jin Young replied. If we can get them out of the prison ships, we can figure out the rest later. Their first target was a medium-sized prison vessel orbiting the ruins of the Villani homeworld. According to the stolen database, it held about 800 Villani workers who were being used to sort through the wreckage of their own cities for useful materials. The approach went smoothly. The Devourer ship's identification codes were accepted, without question, and they were given permission to dock. As far as the prison ship's crew knew, they were just another supply transport bringing food and tools for the workers. They docked at the main cargo bay where 2 Devourer guards were, waiting to inspect their delivery. The guards were unlike anything the humans had seen before. They stood 3 meters tall, with skin that looked like polished metal and forearms that ended in delicate manipulator hands. Their faces were expressionless, and when they spoke it sounded like computers talking to each other. Jae-won shot both guards with his stunner before they could react. That was easy, he muttered as the guards collapsed. Too easy, Jin Young agreed. Something is wrong. They quickly moved deeper into the ship, following the prison ship's layout that Su-young had downloaded from the transport's computer. The Villani workers were kept in large communal cells on the lower decks, guarded by automated systems rather than living beings. When they reached the first cell, the humans got their first look at the species they had come to rescue. The Villani were beautiful in a way that made the human heart ache. They stood about the same height as humans but were much more slender, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold infinite sadness. Their movements were graceful and precise, like dancers who had forgotten how to be happy. But what struck the humans most was how broken they looked. These were not just prisoners of war, they were a people who had given up hope. Su-young activated the translation program and spoke into her communicator. We are here to help you. We are going to get you out. The Villani closest to the cell door looked up with surprise. When the translation came through their communication system, several of them began to weep. One elderly Villani stepped forward and spoke. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. Who are you? Why do you care about us? We are humans, Su-young replied. We heard your message. We came to help. That is impossible. Our message was sent to our colonies. No one answered. Everyone is dead. We are not your people. We accidentally heard your call for help. We came anyway. The old Villani stared at her for a long moment. Then he spoke again. You traveled here from another star? For strangers? Yes. Why? Su-young looked back at Captain Jin Young, who nodded. She turned back to the Villani. Because someone needed help. That was enough. The cell door opened with a soft hiss as Jae-won overrode the locking mechanism. The Villani stepped out cautiously, as if they could not believe they were really free. But their celebration was cut short by the sound of alarms throughout the ship. They know we are here, Jae-won reported. I count at least 20 guards moving toward our position. How long to get these people to our ship? Jin Young asked. Too long. We will never make it. The Villani elder stepped forward and spoke rapidly. The translation system struggled to keep up, but the meaning came through. There are other ways off this ship. Emergency pods. We know where they are. Can you get your people to them? Su-young asked. Yes. But what about you? Before anyone could answer, the first Devourer guards appeared at the end of the corridor. They were different from the ones in the cargo bay, larger, more heavily armed, and moving with deadly purpose. Jae-won opened fire immediately, but his human weapons barely slowed them down. We need to move now. Go, Jin Young shouted to the Villani. Get your people to the escape pods, we will hold them off. The old Villani looked at him with something that might have been gratitude or amazement. You would die for us? We would try not to die at all, Jin Young replied with a grim smile. But yes, if necessary. As the Villani scattered toward the emergency escape systems, the human team took defensive positions in the corridor. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and trapped on an enemy ship with no backup coming. It was exactly the kind of situation humans were best at surviving. How many rounds do you have? Jin Young asked J1. Not enough. Then we better make them count. The battle was brief and vicious. The Devourer guards advanced with mechanical precision, but they had never faced enemies who fought with the desperate creativity of cornered humans. J1 used the ship's own systems against them, overloading power conduits to create improvised explosives. Seulgi turned the artificial gravity on and off at random intervals, sending the guards tumbling through the air. Even Medical Officer Wanho contributed by injecting the ventilation system with medical compounds that would not harm humans or Villani, but played havoc with Devourer biology. When the emergency pods began launching from the prison ship, carrying hundreds of freed Villani to safety, Captain Jin Young felt something he had not experienced since leaving Earth. Hope. They were actually doing it. They were saving people. The celebration was premature. As the last Villani escape pod cleared the prison ship, sensors detected massive movement throughout the Devourer fleet. Ships that had been focused on mining operations were now turning toward the prison ship with obvious hostile intent. Time to go, J1 announced. Where? Seulgi asked. We cannot outrun their entire fleet. Jin Young looked at the tactical display. The escaped Villani were scattered across space in dozens of small pods with limited life support. The human team was trapped on a stolen transport with no way home. The enemy fleet was closing in on all sides. By any reasonable measure, they were about to die. But as he watched the freed Villani pods moving away from their former prison, Jin Young realized that they had already accomplished something impossible. They had given hope to a people who had lost everything. They had proven that someone somewhere still cared enough to help. That would have to be enough.